Well, hello, everybody. We're going to go start by going over some payroll stuff, and Amanda's going to follow up with the HR side of things. I'm Sarah Davis. I work at Ketel Thorstenson as a senior manager in the accounting services department. One of our main things and main questions that we get are different parts of payroll. So the first thing we are going to talk about is the software and how you can figure out which software is best for you. Pretty much a few things to consider is what all you need when it comes to your software. Are you a business that needs to have stuff separated out by jobs as far as job costing, different classes? Do you need direct deposit? The more involved your payroll is, the more intense your software needs to be. So basically, when you're thinking about what software you need to get, you should start by what all do you need involved. One of our main softwares is working with QuickBooks, but there are some limitations. So if you're thinking about something with job costing, which would be your contractors, or if you need different class codes, QuickBooks Desktop is a very good option for you. Where it comes to limitations would be, say, QuickBooks Online. So knowing the difference between those softwares is a huge thing and one of our big questions that we get. There's also some really more intense softwares that you can go with if you need something more complex for your construction business or your more job costing sort of things. And those get pretty specific and more in depth and require a lot of training. The other item would be direct deposit. If you're thinking that you need direct deposit over paper checks, you need to make sure the software you have is either compatible with a bank and can produce a file that you can upload to your bank. Or, like I mentioned, QuickBooks is pretty compatible. It actually fires out its own direct deposit, has its own direct deposit system. So you'd have to figure out which would be more cost effective for you, where QuickBooks is pretty cost effective if your bank charges a pretty good fee for you to do ACH payments. So those are a couple of things to think of when you are looking into your software. Anything more in depth, I mean, we'd be happy to help you in that retrospect, but that's just the real baseline of payroll softwares. The next item we were going to go over is what documents you need to have when you are hiring a new employee. A few things that you need to make sure you have on hand would be your W-4, especially right now, there's a new W-4 for 2020. So make sure you're using the most current one. Same with the form I-9 that gets updated every so often. So when you're pulling those forms, make sure they're the most current. And with the I-9, make sure you get the documentation that it's requesting on there. And as an employer, you need to make sure you fill out the whole form after the employee has filled out their section. These are two of the very important documents you need to have. The W-4 obviously is their withholding. And we do get a lot of questions on the new W-4. One of the most common is in the first section. Now, instead of being able to put your number of dependents or allowances, you actually need to put in a dollar amount. So if your employee is filling out this new form, make sure that they're reading through it. And instead of doing, say, single one like people have done in the past, it's single and $2,000 per dependent, which is a very common question. Also, if you are allowing any deductions with your employees, whether it be health insurance, 401k, any sort of advance, if you're taking out money from your employees for uniforms, make sure you get that in writing, that the employee is aware of it, that they're okay with the deductions that are coming out of their check. This can cause a headache if the employee isn't aware that they're going to have money taken from their check for uniforms or advances, and they don't approve that. It can come around to bite you a little bit. Also, another good thing to have on hand would be if you do direct deposit, it's always good to get a canceled check. Or now a lot of people don't have actual checks, but the banks are more than willing to send a printout that they have on hand that will list the employee's name, routing number, account number. And this is good to have because a lot of times people aren't sure what all numbers to put down. And then you get it sent based on what they wrote, and then it rejects, comes back, and it's an even bigger headache. So it's a good idea to get the canceled check or bank document to support the direct deposit information. That's kind of the bare minimum that you need for documents. I know Amanda will probably cover a few more that are good from the HR side of things, but as far as getting started on payroll, those are a few of the documents. Now when you're hiring an employee or say an independent contractor, one of the more recent things that we are learning is it a independent contractor that you're hiring or an employee? And in the past, we have never thought twice about someone who comes in to clean your office or someone that comes and mows your lawn for your business being an independent contractor. But in recent Department of Labor audits, it has come to head that if these quote unquote independent contractors do not have their own business, that they're doing this service at more than one place as a part of their livelihood, or so to speak, if they're not going and mowing 10 other properties as their job, then technically they should be on payroll. If your child comes, just for reference, summertime, your kid needs something to do, comes and mows the grass at your office building, that's really the only place they're going to mow the lawn. They're an employee. They are not an independent contractor, and they need to be on payroll. We've also had several instances recently of people that come in just as a little side hustle to clean someone's office building that they know the owner personally. They come in and they clean the office, just that office, no other office buildings. And then they have an 8-to-5 job somewhere else. Those people have been getting reclassed as employees during Department of Labor audits as well. So we really need to be careful with who you are determining is a independent contractor that you're going to give a 1099 to, or who should be on payroll as a W-2 employee. And I've had a few people recently say, well, we did give them a 1099, and that's great. You'll get a break when they get reclassed to an employee on the tax side of things, but they still should have been an employee in the Department of Labor's eyes. So just keep that in mind when you're hiring people to do work outside your normal employees. And then as far as outsourcing payroll, that would be our other item that I was going to talk about. What can you outsource with payroll? Quite frankly, whatever you want. We have people that have us just do the payroll tax deposits monthly. We have some that have us do it if they're on a more frequent basis. We get their payroll summary. We file the payroll taxes for them. They want to make sure they calculated right, and we do that part for them. We also have people that have us do the full spectrum of payroll, from entering the hours to sending their direct deposit. And we have people that have us verify their 401k or simple plans. We also have people that want to actually submit all this stuff themselves. So we calculate the payroll, the 401k, and the payroll tax deposits, but those clients would rather submit the payments themselves. So they'll send the direct deposit, they'll send the 401k, make their own payroll tax deposit. So it's a pretty good broad spectrum of what you can actually outsource as far as payroll. It's just figuring out where the biggest time suck is on your side of things and where it would be cost effective to have an outside company help you with your payroll. But again, it could be generally anything. So on my side of things so far, is there any questions out there that anyone would like to ask? All right, Amanda, do you want to go with your part?
Yeah, sure. I'll take over. Thanks, Sarah. Just to follow up, I am Amanda. I am the Human Resources Manager for Ketel Thorstenson. So I run the HR department for the firm, as well as doing some HR consulting with our clients, particularly helping them with their hiring and employee relations issues and figuring out how to handle the staff that you might have, especially for those who don't have an internal HR department. So to piggyback off of some of the things Sarah talked about, we will talk about the employee relations issues and how to handle those when you aren't an HR professional. But I did want to touch base on a couple of documents that really make it beneficial to have in place in order to help not only have your staff understand what the expectations are, but help you along the way in the future if you do come across some employee relations issues and things that you maybe need to discuss with a staff member or multiple staff members. The first thing to have, besides your W-4, your I-9, and those legally documents, is a great job description. So a good job description will set the expectations for the position. You could have in there the hours that you expect them to work. If you have, let's say, a salesperson and they have sales goals that they need to obtain, it's good to have those in there. So you're really setting those expectations so that you know what you are expecting of the staff and that staff member knows what you are expecting of them as well. Some people have very generic job descriptions, which is okay. I then recommend having a supplemental document that maybe you go over with your staff that have the more concrete expectations, goals, things like that, that you might need to go over with them. And then the best thing to do is to have you and that staff member sign off on those job descriptions. You can have a section at the bottom of the job description that just says, I acknowledge that I was reviewed the top portion of this with me. I understand that these are my expectations for my job, and then just sign off on that. It really comes in handy if somebody later on is not meeting those expectations, and then they come and say, well, I never knew I was supposed to do that. And if it's in the job description that they signed off on, they are saying that they understand and they know those. So I recommend that. So either a nice detailed job description that you can give people. If you want something more generic, let's say you've got sales positions at different levels, they all have the same job description, but maybe a more experienced person has a higher sales goal than your new person that just comes in. So you want to have something different for each one of them than maybe having kind of an addendum or an attachment that you have towards that job description that helps with that. So there was a question here, how often should job descriptions be looked at and updated? I at least annually to take a look at them. It's good to look at them on a regular basis because you don't want to have old stagnant job descriptions that people are not actually performing those functions. Or if you see that maybe your person who is normally your front desk person who sits at your reception area and answers phones and all of that, maybe their job changes a little bit or a function or process within the organization changes, that's a great time to look at those job descriptions and make sure that they're actually stating what the person is doing. Because there's a few other things that come with job descriptions like exemption status, if somebody is exempt or non-exempt, hourly versus salaried. Does this person get overtime? A good job description can help with that. So yes, at least annually, and especially if you are making any sort of adjustments or changes within your organization. The second document that I recommend everybody have, and you can have a simple one of these, but is an employee handbook. So making sure you have set aside some time to really develop some good policies and procedures on how you're actually functioning as a business, right? So that could be simple things like at-will employment. I can tell you, you can Google that and you'll find a very well-written job description a policy on that. Those types of things is what you want in a policy handbook, a non-harassment, non-retaliation policy, things like that. I do recommend if you are going to put together a policy or handbook that you do recommend going out and having that be reviewed by an employment law attorney because they are documents that hold people to certain standards. And so you want to make sure you have the right language in there in order to make sure that you can use those in the future if you need to, based on an employee's performance. So if you are going to do a handbook, I do recommend reaching out to an employment law attorney. We have a lot of those in town here that are great. So they'll be able to help you with that. But a well-written handbook is good. And then making sure you give a copy of that handbook to your employees when they start. And then making sure they sign an acknowledgement that says, I've received the handbook. I understand the policies found within it. And then most importantly, I understand that the business has the right to modify and change policies as needed. So make sure you're having those two things. Those are the two other additionals besides a W-2 and an I-9 I would recommend that everybody has. And you can go out and find those or consult an employment law attorney that can really help. So switching gears to the other portion of the training that we wanted to go over, which was a question that we got from Elevate, which was, how do I handle employee issues when I don't have an HR department? And so I wanted to just go over a couple of tips for you guys when it comes to actually dealing with employees, and especially those employees who maybe not meeting your expectations, either in their job or just being a good employee, things like that. So we want to go over a couple of things. And if you do have questions, just please feel free to chat those in the chat function as I go through this. I do want to make sure I cover things that will help you guys when you're going through this. So first one is, what do I do if I have an employee who is not performing their job appropriately? Maybe they're showing up late, or, what I get a lot is they're on their phone all the time, or they're not really going and talking with the customers when they come in, they're ignoring people, stuff like that, right? So you're dealing with all of these employee issues all the time. The first thing I can tell you, and the most important thing, is don't wait. If you see an issue with an employee, you need to address it as soon as you possibly can, right? So if you normally have performance reviews once a year or even every 6 months, where you sit down and you talk with an employee, that's the wrong time to bring something up that happened 3 months earlier, right? Because for 3 months now, they have been performing that function wrong and they're not aware of that, right? So as soon as you see something, you need to address it. The second thing would be, don't address that situation in front of everybody else. Pull that staff member aside or set up a time to meet with them to go through and discuss the situation, because you never know what's going to come of that. And it's just not appropriate to be reprimanding a staff member in front of everybody else. Pull them aside, take them into the office and just say, hey, we need to talk about this topic, right? So do it right away and make sure you're doing it in private. One other thing to keep in mind when you are having that meeting is I recommend just don't beat around the bush. Talk to the staff member about it and focus on the behaviors. So if somebody's coming into work late, right? So we say, the last 3 days you've showed up 15 minutes late. Can you tell me why you're coming into work late? Or, I just saw you out there and there was a customer in the office and you ignored them. How do I, you should be going out there and talking to those individuals. Let's talk about that, right? So you're focusing on the behavior, what you actually see and not what you feel, right? So we want to talk about the actual behavior that the person has, and then talk with them. Have that conversation. Just sit down and say, this is what I see. Tell me a little bit about that. So somebody's coming in late every day. Say, you're coming in 15 minutes late almost every day. Are you having trouble coming into work on time? Tell me a little bit about why you can't get here by 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, whatever time they start. And then have that open dialogue and that discussion and say, do you know that the expectation is for you to be here at 8 o'clock? How can we make sure you can be here? And then it's a two-way street, having those conversations, making sure they understand. Some things are cut and dry, right? If somebody is, well, I can't just get out of bed in the morning, right? Well, you have to be here. Or it could be the last couple of days, the buses run late and I have to take the bus into work, or my car's not working, so I'm having to catch a ride, So sometimes there are going to be those things where you can really talk through that and say, well, we still need you to be here. We understand that sometimes life is difficult and things happen, but we need you to be here on time. So having those two-way conversations, making sure they know those expectations, pull that job description or that attachment to the job description out again and say, hey, let's just review this. We need to make sure that you understand what we expect of you as an employee, right? So you have those documentations that you can then bring into that conversation to have with them. Making sure to set those expectations, review those with them, and then figure out a plan going forward, right? So if it's a temporary situation of, my car's broke, so I'm taking the bus and the bus doesn't really get here until 8:05 and then I have to walk to get here, maybe say, okay, well, we expect that to change once you can get your vehicle fixed. What's your plan for that? Those types of things versus I just can't get out of bed right in the morning and say, no, that needs to change immediately. And if we don't see that change, we will have a very different conversation, which may result in discharge and termination of employment. So making sure you're setting those expectations. Then you get done with that meeting. Immediately, you are going to take out a piece of paper or pull open a Word document on your computer, and you're going to type up some notes, right? You're going to type up what you discussed, the expectations that you went over, maybe the action plan that you have in place, and you're going to type that up and you're going to put that in the employee's personnel file, right? Because you had that conversation and you want to document it. One of the key words in the HR industry is documentation, documentation, documentation. We try to document everything that we can. So even if it is a verbal conversation that you have with a staff member, you want to document that after the fact and put it in their personnel file. It could just be as simple as November 16, 2020, had a conversation with Amanda. Here's what we discussed. And then you list it out, right? Those are good to have if you then need to follow up with that person because they are not coming to work on time, right? They are still not coming to work on time. You can say, we talked about this on November 16. Here were the expectations. We can't have you coming into work late anymore. Unfortunately, we are going to have to let you go, right? It's easier to have that conversation when you know you've already talked with that staff member about this particular situation, okay? If there's something that's more complicated, let's say they're not performing their job well, say it's a salesperson and they're not meeting their sales goals. And so you've had this verbal conversation of, hey, just wanting to make sure you know what these expectations are. Let's talk through your struggles. Then you document that. The next step potentially is if they're not continuing to perform well is to do a formal written performance review, performance improvement plan, and walking through some of the more details. And you could definitely do that. Again, you're going to have a document that you fill out. And then at the end, both you and the employee are going to sign off on that and put that in the employee's personnel file. If they don't meet those expectations, the next meeting you have may be, this job isn't right for you. You're not meeting your expectations. We need to terminate employment, right? So documentation that helps when you are moving forward with different things when it comes to either disciplining a staff member or terminating somebody's employment because of performance-related issues. So make sure you document that. Yes, and some people do need to see some things in writing, and really, sometimes you have that verbal conversation and they don't quite get it, right? So it's always nice to have that handwritten, here's what we discussed, here's what you need to look at. And some people need some time to think it through and to really grasp at what's being said at that point in time. And having something in writing really helps those individuals because everybody learns and grows in different ways. So once you have all that documentation, making sure that if there is something that you've stated you are going to do in order to help that staff member, that you do that, right? So, let's say it's a staff member at Ketel Thorstenson who's struggling with something, right? Maybe they're not quite understanding the payroll process. We'll just pick that since that's what Sarah was talking about, right? What we may do is provide training, right? Pair them up with another staff member who's maybe our payroll expert and say, hey, we want you to meet with this person to go over these things. We may find a webinar that they can attend or, look to see if there's a training locally that Elevate's putting on or somebody else maybe be putting on that we can send somebody to. And so making sure that if that is in that documentation that says this is what the organization is going to do in order to help you, that you actually follow up with that. Right? So don't set any expectations for yourself that you are not going to be able to meet, right? And then making sure you're following up on an ongoing basis with that staff member in order to make sure they're still meeting that expectation. A lot of that comes into play if you have a performance improvement plan where you're trying to help that person become a great employee for you. But don't ever hesitate to, terminate a relationship that really isn't working, right? And so you want to make sure that you're taking that into consideration when it comes to how much you are willing to do for this employee, if you truly can see that there is just not a right fit, right? And sometimes that may be difficult to do, but we have to realize that we have to run as a business, even though that hurts us as individuals and as human beings to maybe fire somebody or let somebody go because they're not meeting expectations. You'd be surprised. Most people know that they're not meeting expectations, and most people will be appreciative, maybe not right away, that maybe, this wasn't a right fit for me, those types of things. So making sure you're following up with anything that you may have stated in your performance improvement plan or in your documentation that you as an organization will do. That is key. If you then turn around and say you're going to terminate somebody and they maybe bring a wrongful termination suit or something like that against you. So one way to get around some of this is to provide regular feedback to your staff members. Like I mentioned, if you do performance reviews once a year, you are missing out on providing excellent feedback to your staff and having good employees that you can retain. If you are not giving constant feedback, both positive and constructive, to your staff members, you're going to have those individuals who really struggle and don't know where they stand. And I hear this a lot, is I don't know where I stand as an employee, right? I don't know how well I'm doing. I don't know if I'm doing well. I don't know if I'm doing poorly. And then their annual review comes around and it's horrible, right? Because they're not meeting this expectation. They're not meeting this expectation. You shouldn't only hear that once a year, right? So provide regular, ongoing feedback is essential to having good employees that will stay with you as an organization. And it's especially true of the younger generations. They do like to have that constant feedback and that constant communication with their supervisors or their managers in order to make sure they're doing things well and appropriately.
Piggybacking off that, Amanda, here we also encourage that the staff ask too. We always have a two-way street when all these relationships. So encouraging the staff to ask if they have questions on their performance, if they're doing something right, wrong, or should do it differently. And a lot of that takes them building a relationship with you too. So if you can start the feedback with them, maybe they'd be more apt to ask you if they have questions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Good point, Sarah. Yes. And really, like Sarah said, the only way to get your staff to feel comfortable walking up to you and asking, how am I doing? Or I just did this project and I wasn't quite sure, is to build that good relationship with them so that they know that open communication is key to being successful in their position, and building those relationships and saying, being approachable is really a good part of that. So before I jump into resources, are there any specific questions, anything else that anybody had questions on? That
there's one in the Q&A, Amanda. It says tips on how to stay connected and to manage employees who are working from home.
Yes. So that is kind of our, our world nowadays, right? I'm working from home this week. And so one of the ways that we do that as an organization and as a firm is to really schedule the time. I know this may sound kind of funny, but if you know that you need to reach out to your staff who are working from home, schedule the time. If it's 5 minutes every morning that you just go through your list and talk with people, do it. Set up Zoom meetings. In our office, we use Teams. And so that helps a lot, where we're able to just kind of chat with each other, see people. We spend a lot of time going through and making sure everybody had webcams and the ability to do video chatting and things like that in order to help maintain some of that connection. Because we are a very social group of individuals and a people-oriented business. And so having that ability really helps. So my recommendation is set aside time. If that's right away in the morning, if that's sometime in the afternoon, even if it's, just a quick, hey, how's it going? That works really well too. If you can't, because usually you just walk down the hall and talk to them. Well, schedule that time, because your days get busy and your days fly by, I'm sure, just like mine do. And so if you don't have that scheduled on your calendar and it pops up as a reminder, you're not going to do it, right? So schedule it ahead of time. And then it's, maybe if you have some managers or individuals, you can delegate that down to, so it's not you as the business owner who's solely trying to reach out to 20 people. That can be a lot. Delegate that down. You can also think of maybe doing some fun events that include those people who are working from home. For Ketel Thorstenson, we just did our Halloween events. Usually we do pumpkin carving in our training room with groups of individuals, right? So we didn't do that this year. So instead, the firm bought pumpkins for anybody who wanted to. They could carve them at home and then take pictures and send them in. So anybody could participate in that, even if they weren't currently working in the office. Same with our Halloween costume contest. It was making sure we're kind of thinking through that a little bit in order to allow those who are not working in our office to actually participate and still feel like they're part of the firm versus somebody lying way out over here who is working from home who we never see. So thinking through that and kind of making sure you're always looking at those individuals, think about them. If you have an organization where you have multiple offices, how do you keep in touch with those people at the other office, right? And so that's just somebody working from home is just another office. So trying to think through that and make sure you're doing that, but schedule those appointments, make it a priority for you. And then hopefully then in return, your employees will also reach out to you because they understand that this is a two-way street. They're approachable. They really are focused on my well-being and hoping that I'm a good employee. So hopefully that will return to you as good employees and retained employees. So I hope that answers that question. So anything else? Any other questions? Specifics, right? Mentioned, some things have the ability to be cut and dry, right? If somebody's not showing up to work on time and you tell them once or twice that, hey, you need to show up to work on time, there's no need to do a whole bunch of performance review, performance improvement plans and all of that, because if you don't show up to work on time, you don't show up to work on time versus somebody who isn't performing well. So don't hesitate to say, I said this to you once before, as long as you're making sure you document. So there was a question in the Q&A. Do you have any recommendations for online sources for offer letters, job descriptions, or handbooks? Yes, I actually have 3 recommendations on resources for human resources related functions for a job for you guys as business owners. The first is the National Human Resources Society, or the Society for Human Resource Management. It's SHRM, SHRM.org. And they are the national organization that oversees the HR profession basically in the world. So I have several certifications that are through the HR Society. And so they maintain and they also help with advocation and all of that kind of stuff. But one of the great resources that they have is their online library of documents. Now, a lot of that you do have to become a member in order to access that. But for about $200 a year, it is a great resource. And you do not have to necessarily be an HR professional in order to have a membership, right? So you can go out there. They have gobs of job descriptions that you can pull and manipulate to fit for what you have. They have templates for offer letters, policies, onboarding, PowerPoint presentations, and how to do great onboarding and all of these types of things, how to interview appropriately without asking the inappropriate questions for discrimination purposes. So again, that's the Society for Human Resource Management, or SHRM.org. And I do highly recommend that as a great resource. Now, not everybody in your organization needs to have that a login or a user account with them. You can have one that you share, but it does have a lot of great resources on there. The other ones that I recommend is the Small Business Administration, SBA. They do have some good resources out there for small businesses when it comes to human resources. I was just on there kind of looking around the other day in preparation for today, and they have some great things on recruitment and hiring in order to help you with, again, making sure you're not asking any illegal questions or anything like that. So SBA has some great resources for you guys as well. And then more on a local level, I belong to the local chapter of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management. It's Black Hills SHRM. And we don't have resources like the national organization does for templates and things like that. But we do meet on a regular basis. This year, it's all been virtual, but we do trainings. And they focus on a number of different things. It could be the basics of FMLA, or it could be, I think our one coming up here in December is how to return people to work from working from home, right? So we do these trainings on a monthly basis where somebody either locally who's an HR professional, or we hire people who are national speakers to speak to us about these topics. It's also a great way to network and kind of get into that world of human resources. We do not require that you are an HR professional to be a part of the organization. You just have to be passionate about human resources or have human resources as part of your function. So we have CFOs, controllers, individuals like that, COOs, who are part of our membership because they do the HR function for their firm or their organization. And so they can reach out. We typically, in a normal world, we do luncheons. So you're networking with everybody, those types of things. So if you're interested in looking at that, it's the Black Hills Human Resources Association, or bhshrm.org is our website, and you can kind of go out there and look at that. Membership is really reasonable and gives you some great resources. So those would be my three main ones. One thing about Googling, you want to make sure you're looking at a legitimate site if you're Googling things, especially if you're Googling about laws. And I'm sure Sarah would say the same thing if you're looking at payroll related questions. Make sure you're looking at trusted resources because there are a lot of things out there that are not correct or they are outdated. And the payroll HR law changes quite often. So you want to make sure you're looking at a legitimate site and make sure you're looking at dates on those to make sure that it's a 2020 or more recent, because there could be something that you're looking at that's from 2016 that is already outdated. So if you are Googling things, just make sure you look at those dates and things like that. So any other questions? Good questions. Not seeing any. I should say another good resource is Ketel Thorstenson. Between all of us over at the firm, we do post things on a regular basis on our website. If, we're pushed, Beth Hoddle, our marketing manager, she pushes all of us to write news articles and blog posts and things like that. So if you are not following us on social media, we do highly recommend that. We post things constantly. If when the new W-4 came out, we posted about that. If there's an updated I-9, we'll make sure that information goes out. We try to post regularly about anything that's coming up, especially recently with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and all of the leave that goes along with that. So make sure you are following us on social media, and we do try to get as much information out to the public as we possibly can, both on the HR side as well as the accounting side. So we do have some resources out there as well for that. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Sarah, is there anything else that you wanted to touch base on?
Oh, my topics were pretty basic. So if anybody has a more specific question for me as well, fire away, but did a great job, Amanda.
Great, thanks. And I would say I'm here to help. My information's out on the Ketel Thorstenson website. So just look for Amanda Doctor. And I can help you as well, or guide you in the right direction if you need some help with finding, maybe you're looking at a employee handbook and you want to talk to an employment law attorney. I can kind of steer you in a direction of somebody who can help out in that sense. But we're kind of here. I'm kind of here to help if you need anything.
I'd say it's maybe not surprising that a lot of businesses don't have an HR specific person. So we do get questions on who to ask when people have questions, and we refer them to Amanda. She's more than willing to help. So
yep, definitely. So okay, well, great. Well, thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, ladies, and thanks everyone for being here. And there's more trainings coming, so you can go to elevaterapidcity.com and register for more trainings in November. And soon we'll be releasing our trainings for December. So thank you so much, and everyone have a great day.